Snow drifted gently through the streets of New York on Christmas Eve, coating the city in a blanket of white that glittered under the golden streetlights. People hurried past with shopping bags and laughter, carols echoed from storefronts, and somewhere in the festive noise was a silence so deep it swallowed joy whole. That silence belonged to Ethan Cole, a 36-year-old millionaire whose life looked perfect from the outside but hollow from within. He stood before the enormous window of his penthouse, looking down at the glowing city that once made him feel alive. Success had come early to him. His real estate empire stretched across the skyline, but no tower he built ever reached the heart he lost 3 years ago when his wife, Anna, died of cancer. Since then, Christmas had felt like a cruel joke, an echo of love he could no longer touch. The only thing that still kept him breathing was his 6-year-old daughter, Lily, whose laughter was the last light in his mansion of loneliness. That evening she ran into his study, clutching a small gift wrapped in silver paper, her cheeks pink from excitement. She said, "Daddy, can we go see the big Christmas tree downtown? Mommy always took me there." The words pierced him gently. Every mention of Anna was both a wound and a memory he refused to let die. He smiled, forced and fragile, and told her to put on her red coat. Soon they were driving through the snow-dusted streets, the car filled with the soft hum of Christmas songs. Lily pressed her nose to the window, her eyes wide at the shimmering lights. Ethan glanced at her and, for a moment, felt something stir inside, a reminder that love still lived in small things. They arrived at the plaza, where the city's grand Christmas tree stretched toward the heavens, its golden star glowing like a promise. Families gathered, couples kissed, and children spun in circles catching snowflakes on their tongues. Ethan lifted Lily onto his shoulders so she could see the lights better. Her laughter melted the cold in his chest. But then, as they walked past the edge of the square, Lily's laughter stopped. She pointed toward a shadowed alley where the music didn't reach. There, under a flickering streetlight, a young woman in a torn gray hoodie was digging through a trash bin. Her hair was tangled, her hands red from the cold, and she held an old, tattered book she'd just pulled from the garbage. Ethan's first instinct was to turn Lily away, to shield her from the ugliness of life, but she tugged his hand and whispered, "Daddy, why is she sad? Didn't Mommy say we should help sad people?" Ethan's throat tightened. He wanted to say something sensible, to teach his daughter about danger or boundaries, but her innocence disarmed him. He walked over slowly, the crunch of snow loud in the alley's silence. The woman froze when she saw him, as if expecting to be scolded. She said softly that she wasn't stealing, she was just looking for something to read to keep her mind warm. Her voice trembled like the wind. Ethan stared at her, stunned that in this freezing night she sought not food or coins but words. He asked if she had anywhere to go, and she shook her head, saying she would manage like she always did. Lily slipped off her red scarf and wrapped it around the woman's neck, saying Merry Christmas. The woman's eyes glistened, she smiled faintly and whispered, "Thank you, little angel, you just gave me the warmest gift in years." Ethan felt something inside him break, the wall he'd built between himself and the world. He invited her to join them for dinner, and though she hesitated, ashamed of her state, he said quietly that it wasn't charity, it was Christmas. In a small diner glowing with yellow light, they sat together by the window while snow kept falling outside. The waitress gave them curious looks, but Ethan ignored them. The woman introduced herself as Grace. Once, she said, she'd been a teacher, she loved books, children, and the idea that kindness could change lives. But after her mother fell ill, she'd spent every penny she had on medical bills. When her mother passed, debt followed, and soon she lost her job, her apartment, and her faith in people. Ethan listened silently while Lily dipped fries into her milkshake and occasionally smiled at Grace as if she'd found a new friend. Grace said she didn't believe in miracles anymore, she'd prayed too many times into an empty sky. Ethan looked at her and said maybe miracles aren't loud, they just whisper when we're quiet enough to listen. Grace met his gaze, and for a moment, the world outside that diner ceased to exist. When dinner ended, Ethan offered to drive her to a shelter, but when they arrived, it was already full. Without thinking twice, he brought her to his home. She tried to refuse, saying she didn't belong in a place like that, but he insisted, saying no one belongs in the cold on Christmas Eve. That night, after Lily fell asleep, Ethan found Grace standing on the balcony, staring at the city lights. She said softly that she felt small here, surrounded by people who had everything when she had nothing. He told her he used to think the same way, even with everything. They talked until dawn, about pain, loss, hope, and second chances, and when morning came, it felt as if two broken lives had started to mend at the edges. The days that followed changed them all. Grace began helping around the house, reading stories to Lily, and filling the mansion with a warmth that hadn't existed since Anna's death. Ethan watched how gently she spoke, how she smiled even when she thought no one saw her, and how Lily clung to her as if she were family. Weeks turned into months, and Ethan realized that his emptiness was slowly being replaced by gratitude. One evening, he found Grace sitting by the fire, reading the same book she'd rescued from the trash that night. He asked her why that book mattered so much, and she said it reminded her that even discarded things could still hold stories worth reading. Ethan smiled, realizing she was talking about herself. He told her that she wasn't a discarded story but a chapter that saved his own. Time moved quietly after that. Grace found a new teaching job through one of Ethan's contacts, and though she tried to move into her own apartment, Lily refused to let her go. One snowy evening a year later, Ethan stood again before that same window where he once felt nothing. But this time, Grace was beside him, Lily asleep on her shoulder. He whispered that maybe Christmas really was the season of miracles. Grace smiled and said, "Or maybe it's just the season when hearts remember how to give." Ethan leaned down and kissed her forehead, and for the first time in years, the silence in his home turned into music. The story spread through Ethan's company, then through the neighborhood, how the city's richest man opened his doors to a woman everyone ignored, and how that one act of kindness gave him back his life. People often asked him later why he did it, and he would answer simply that it wasn't him who saved her, it was her who reminded him to live. On the next Christmas Eve, he and Grace volunteered at the same shelter they once visited, serving food and handing out books. Every child received one gift, a small tag that read, "You are never forgotten." As snow began to fall again, Ethan looked up at the sky, thinking of Anna, knowing she would have approved. He had learned that miracles don't always come with angels or shining lights, sometimes they arrive in the form of a homeless woman digging through trash, searching for something worth holding on to. And that was the night his story turned from loss to love, from wealth to worth, from loneliness to life. So, dear listener, if you ever feel lost, remember Ethan and Grace. Remember that kindness costs nothing but can change everything, that hope can be found in the coldest corners, and that sometimes, the miracle you're waiting for is simply the act of opening your heart. If this story touched you even a little, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because every time you spread a story of kindness, you become part of someone else's miracle.